How about now? The stream delay is going to be a little bit, but you should be able to hear me now. Can you hear me now? We're going to keep going while we determine whether we can hear or not. So I have about 9 years of experience writing software. Grew up off McFarland Road. That's just a couple minutes north of here, so I'm an Alpharetta native. I am a husband to my wife, Nicole, and father of my twin boys, Nathaniel and Gabriel. Two truths and a lie about me. My dad was shot 6 times before I was born. My cousin testified in front of Congress on behalf of the PMRC, and I was offered an internship at Google when I was 14. So over the course of this 11-week course, you'll be able to figure out which one of those is a lie and which 2 of those are truths. So you also are going to share 2 truths and a lie about yourself. So those on Slack, you should be able to hear me now. If you can, go ahead and introduce yourself in the Slack channel and share 2 truths and a lie about yourself that we can deduce over the course of this 11 weeks. And here's a picture of me and my family. I just wanted to share that. And now it's your turn. So for those of us that are in person, if you're okay with just standing up and saying your name and giving a brief intro, that would be great. I know 2 of you. I know I met you just before, so. That's okay. Nice to meet you, Tara.
What do you do for a living now? I'm certified as a personal trainer. Okay, I don't really have any plans yet.
Okay.
Cool. Hi, I'm Raven, and I recently quit my job in April, so I am living life, enjoying the summer, trying to figure out what's next.
This is a great place to figure out what's next.
My name is Alon.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Alon. Sorry, go ahead. Oh, you finished? Sorry. I am so sorry. All right, well, for those of you in Slack, we'll go over some of those introductions later. We're going to get into how to get valuable to companies today. We're going to sign you up for some essential tools and services, and then we're going to do a little bit of coding. So what this lecture will and won't cover is we'll give you some tips and tricks on how to market yourself as a software developer. We'll give you an overview of the tools and languages we'll be using. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and React. We'll tell you what you can expect a software job to be, how to find answers if you don't know them. That is the single most important piece. What's up?
Someone has had issues getting in. It still says the video should start soon.
Oh, did I not hit go live? Yeah.
Oh, it's an app.
I'll go ahead and post the live stream link. I have 3 viewers already. So we're live right now. Let me get a shareable link. And I'll just copy and paste it into here. So this link, that link should get you in. Okay. Anybody still having trouble? And this will stay up as a video, recorded video, so you can go back and look at it later on, and I'll share that via Slack in a second. So these lectures are supposed to supplement the material in freecodecamp.org. That is the primary curriculum for this coding class. We will be using that because it is self-paced, it's graded by itself, so we can just see the benefits and results of your projects and progress through the course. We'll also look at a roadmap or direction for the lifelong learning you have to do as a software developer. Because technology changes, it mostly stays the same, I've come to find out the more I learn, but when technology changes, you do have to adapt and go to where the jobs are in some ways. So, for instance, AngularJS was very popular in the 2010s, early 2010s. Now it's been mostly supplanted by React, which is what we'll be learning throughout this course. What we won't go over is we won't look at every single minute detail or reference for the languages we're going to use. We will not check every type of software position. We're not going to go over the differences between an architect or an engineer or a QA tester or a support person. We're not going to learn how to use X or Y language or tool because there's just too many and we can't go outside of the very narrow, actually very broad wheelhouse we're already in. So we won't go into how to administrate your computer well. That's something we'll work through, but you'll have to pick up those skills as you go, making sure you know what's installed on your computer and how to uninstall, reinstall, etc. And we won't go over how to write code for targets other than the browser. So what that means is when you open up Google Chrome, code runs in that browser. We're not going to get outside of that. We're not going to open up a desktop application. We're not going to try to make a mobile application. So it's mostly just going to run on browsers, which browsers run on all devices nowadays. So you can get one on your phone and a laptop. So you'll be able to write code that will run across all devices, but it's going to be browser specific. So. The rule number one in this class is do not panic. If something goes wrong, there's usually an error message that will tell you what's gone wrong. And the great thing about that is that these messages are written by other human beings. And so they know the stress and frustration. And so they're going to write them to the best of their ability, but they still might be a little technical for those just getting into it. So we'll keep calm and remember we have an undo key. Control Z. Couple of things to know about the software industry. Companies will generally compete for you if you have demonstrated knowledge of certain technologies. So like React.js is a very competitive market for employers, right? They're often scrambling to get talent. There's not enough talent to go around at all these various companies that are starting software projects. Unfortunately, this talent deficit is not helped by companies not wanting to train people because they believe that is a cost sink. They believe you're just going to use that talent that you gained to go find a better job somewhere else. So they won't do it, much to their detriment, I think. Knowing how to do something technical is not as important as communicating technically. So what that means is that you need to be able to tell other people what the computer is doing, what the code you've written is doing. That is more important than writing the code itself. In fact, if you can come in after someone's written code and tell other people what that code is doing, you're going to be promoted over that person who wrote that code. What companies are paying for is the sharing of knowledge. They're not paying you to know things, they're paying you to share what you know. They're paying you to create the knowledge base for their software moving forward. You always need to know more than you do currently, so that's where lifelong learning comes in. Boring technology may often be the better technology. So when I said CRM and ERP are boring, those are necessary products for a lot of industries. So it might not be the most glamorous thing to work on, but it is what will get the job done fastest. It is invaluable to be able to read and understand data of various kinds. So the way I think of computer science and engineering is getting the computer to make sense when we look at it. It's making that interface connection between the screen and you. So you'll need to be able to deduce and read data of various kinds, right? So you think of an Excel spreadsheet, right? Everyone's familiar with an Excel spreadsheet? Yeah. An Excel spreadsheet, we'll be doing a lot of similar things with a data type called JSON, right? It's going to look nothing like an Excel spreadsheet, but it can be translated one-to-one between the two very easily. So it's a really good skill to be able to translate data between formats. But the bottom line is what you know and how you communicate it, or what you are selling to companies. So the way we'll learn through this process is we'll do the lessons and projects on freecodecamp.org. So if you haven't signed up for freecodecamp.org, do so as soon as possible. You can even do it while I'm talking right now. They have a suite of tools and forms and programs that will teach you how to code in a self-paced fashion, right? So they'll tell you what you need to know to do a project. You'll do the project, and then you'll keep going. And it will grade your progress, and you will be assessed instantly. So you won't have to wait at all for us to grade any code or anything like that. So that's really helpful for us. You also sign into Slack and ask the folks on there for help if you don't know what you're doing or don't have any idea how a particular exercise in Free Code Camp should work. So you might run into roadblocks with some of the projects that are harder to do or more difficult now, right? So it won't be difficult at the end of this class, hopefully, to do the projects. But if you don't understand something, we can hop on Slack and give you some pointers and tips. We can also give you a call over Google Meet or something like that if that's necessary. But that'll probably be on nights and weekends because all of the instructors actually have 9-to-5 day jobs. So we'll have to put those responsibilities above the coding class. And obviously families as well. Then you're going to network with other students in your cohort and professionals on Slack. So this is where it's important to communicate here and on Slack. So when you come here and communicate, just get to know folks, right? Get to know the people around you and build that camaraderie because you are learning something new, and that can always be challenging and frustrating, and when you have people alongside you, it helps out quite a bit. You get to see and celebrate other successes, and you get to see other people's triumphs over trials as well, and that's really cool. Then finally, the big hope is that you get a job in the software industry. That's not a guarantee by any means, because the software industry is so interested in making sure you know what you can do what you're hired to do before you do it. But that's where I'll be working behind the scenes to get networked with other professionals as well in the industry to see what jobs are available. And then finally, you'll come back and teach, learn, and grow at SoftGuild. So SoftGuild is not a one and done thing. We kind of want to keep going. So you'll be able to give back to the community as well as learn from other professionals. So that's the other thing we want to do is create like a professional meetup culture so that we can teach each other new things about technology that we enjoy. So yeah, that's sort of the framework of the class. So let's talk about some code. And I don't know if I'll be able to do this while I'm streaming, but let's open a new window. I may have brought the underpowered laptop.
You may also need to zoom in on that if you're sharing this.
I will, yes. Yes, I will zoom in. So this is an interactive piece. You can follow along if you'd like.
Do you guys have Visual Studio Code installed?
No, that's
You
the other
need to
thing.
have
Yeah,
Visual
yeah.
Studio Code installed, so if you could do that now, just
Yes, this is an interactive exercise. For those that are on Slack, you will download and install Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to copy this link to, whoops, that's a Google link. I want the actual. So for those watching at home, we have this link in the Slack channel. You'll go to that link, and it'll look something like this, and you'll pick the download for your particular computer, right? So you might have a Windows computer or a Mac computer. So if you have a Mac computer, you'll just click that link. I posted the link in the Slack channel.
directly to this site. And it should be in the Slack.
Yep. Yeah, just this right here. And then once you download it, you can install it just by double clicking on the executable or DMG file. Is it a DMG? Yep.
Or if you're on Linux.
If anyone's on Linux, you already know how to code, I'm sure.
Not necessarily.
That's true.
You might be very poor. You may not have been able to afford a Mac or Windows PC.
Well, that's true. It is a free operating system. You doing okay? Yeah. Alon, you doing okay?
I'm gonna have issues with my computer. I'll just download it later.
Okay. You have a web browser, right? That'll get you started on Free Code Camp. But what I'm going to do right now is just demonstrate what we're going to be learning. So I'm going to create a folder. Oop, not that one. It's a video project folder. Documents, projects. SoftGuild. Select folder. And you can do the same. You can create a folder and then open it by going to Open Folder. Okay. And you'll create a new file. We'll call this. Well, actually, it just wants you to start typing. So what we want to do is get a web page that says "Hello World." So to do that, we want a web page that says "Hello World" in big bold letters. To do that in HTML,
You're streaming it off.
yeah, it keeps going out. I don't know why. You type "Hello World," and then save it as index.html.
Sorry, I'm having trouble getting to that page.
Yeah, can you
Okay.
slow down
Yep.
Yeah, so
Yeah, let me go
we're
around.
gonna do a new file
Okay.
and then name it something .html. It can be whatever you want. Index is what we typically call it, index.html.
And that's for there's a whole reason why we call it index HTML. That's because web servers traditionally look for the index document, which is what shows up when you go to softguild.org, right? So softguild.org looks for index documents. So that's why we name the front page index HTML.
You got a question?
What should we choose for the settings?
So they have to select text file first. Didn't used to. It looks like you have to select text. It doesn't let you select another type of file. You just select text file and then save as something else.
So what should we choose for the settings once we first open up Visual Studio?
You already set a lot up.
Yeah, there were like a few different options.
Which one did you pick?
I just kind of hit like next, mark is done. Just whatever it has.
Just hit next and yes, says Raven. There's a lot of configuration options for Visual Studio, and we're not going to go into all of them today.
What is Visual Studio?
It is a code editing program. So this is where you'll write and create new projects for your websites. You can use this as a tool to explore outside of Free Code Camp. Free Code Camp is great because it's all built in.
So they won't have to use it in order to code in Free Code Camp.
No.
Not all of it. Some of it require an outside editor.
No. You can use codepen.io if you want to use that. That's what I used for most of the projects. And don't be intimidated by the 300 hours. These are very quick exercises.
So hours really means like 300 each.
Is there any,
I don't know. It is not easy, but it is not 300 hours because that's almost 6 months of dedicated time, right? Math is 20. Actually, I should do the math. Okay.
is there like
3.
a guide anywhere on like Visual Code Camp, like step 1, like do this, or step 2, or?
It will walk you through the exercises. It's mostly going to be focused on helping you learn to program. What we're doing now is we're setting up tools
Okay.
and environments, which sometimes can be more important or just as important as knowing how to code.
It's really what you're going to need once you step outside of Free Code Camp because if you're going to get a job, it's not going to be writing code in Free Code Camp,
Yeah.
right? Free Code Camp is not a code editor, so I wanted to make sure that you knew that Visual Studio existed and we're able to use it before you continue on to Free Code Camp
Do you use Visual Studio Code like in your day-to-day?
every day.
If you develop for the web, you most likely will, unless you're using some sort of proprietary.
Right. I actually use WebStorm for most of my editing, and that's a different code editor. There are plenty of other code editors out there. Visual Studio Code is a pretty good industry standard. It's written by Microsoft, which owns GitHub, and NPM, so both very big web technologies. And that's why we kind of use it. Is most people know how to use Visual Studio Code, so people will be able to help you when you run into issues with it. There's plenty of. This is the other thing you'll have to learn when you evaluate technology as a software engineer. Who has the most knowledge about it, right? If it's a broad knowledge, if everybody knows about it, it's going to be easier to find answers to your problems because more people will have those same problems you're having. So Right, then save as index HTML. And what's going to happen is this isn't going to work the way I wrote it. Right, so you saved it as index HTML, then you reveal in File Explorer. This will open it up so you can see it, and then you double click it, and now it says Hello World, but it's not in big bold letters. So as a software developer, I'm going to say, I don't know how to make big bold letters in HTML. And this is a tutorials point that says, to make text bold in HTML, use the B tag or strong. And this is a bit of a manufactured example, but you could use this solution to make it bold, but it will not make it big. I know the answer. I was just showing you how I would come about to the answer. Google is your friend. The best kept secret of software engineering is that we don't know how to do anything, but Google does. So if you can get good at Googling and understanding what questions you're asking, you will go far as a software engineer. Very far. It's crazy how far you can go. And it's crazy, it's crazy how much is on the internet for you to see just free. There's free code camp. There's YouTube tutorials on how to make everything from a streaming website to, a recipe application. There's so many resources out there. The hardest part is knowing which ones are actually useful and what you're trying and are going to help you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
Just type in Hello World. Because
I did.
Nothing came up.
Nothing came up?
So did you try to open this in web browsing?
Yes.
Yeah,
So
so-
like, control,
Okay, what browser are you using? I'm using Firefox, so there may be some difference there. That's the other thing you'll learn as a web developer. It worked? Huh.
Did you type Hello World before you saved the file? Let me try it.
Yeah, you may need to save the file again.
And also they try to be as similar as possible. The version of Chrome for Mac is slightly different than the one for Windows.
Another thing, the beat, the letter beat to make it bold. When you type it and then close it.
So what it's doing, so what it's doing is it's trying to help you. But you're always going to want a opening and a closing tab. So it's putting both of them, and you will put your text between, and then you would get rid of this.
Space after.
It doesn't matter.
HTML ignores white space, so any spaces or tabs will be ignored. So what I did here is I pulled an H1 tag, or I created an H1 tag. And what that tag is this open bracket, H1, close bracket, is the start of the tag. And then open bracket slash H1, close bracket, is the end of the tag. And anything between that is going to be rendered as what's called a header. So that header will look very different than what we just showed a second ago, right? So, oh my, that was not what I wanted to do.
Just reopen it.
Just reopen all the tabs.
Just reopen your
Yeah,
name.
yeah, yeah. So you'll see the difference here. Hello World is a lot bigger than it was before, right? So if you go back here, and then what I'm going to do is comment that HTML out, and now it will disappear from the page if I reload it.
What does commenting out mean?
Commenting out means to tell the browser to ignore the line, right? So there's a quick shortcut in Visual Studio Code that puts this open bracket, bang, or exclamation point, dash dash, and then a dash dash close bracket around the HTML. And what that will do for you is it'll tell the browser to ignore whatever's between those brackets.
Is
So-
there a purpose for that?
I leave comments, so when you start writing, this is very simple right now, but you could have something with thousands of lines. And you might want to say, okay, this is the reason I'm writing this, so that in writing in plain English, so that when you come back, you can say, okay, this is why I wrote it. Because you may write something, and then next year, someone's like, hey, you need to fix something here. We found a bug that no one caught, and you go back to the comments, you might be able to figure it out, but it would probably take you longer than if you documented what everything does.
Yeah, and there's some schools of thought that say you should comment so rigorously that it looks like you're reading a book, right? That's a bit extreme. Some people say you shouldn't comment at all, and the code should just read like a book anyway. I think that's a little extreme too. You should write comments when it is not clear to anyone else outside of you what the code is doing.
And I would say most importantly, if you're doing this in the context of a job and a team, it's most important to find out what your team does. Because you may say, hey, you know what, I want to comment this, and I want to have all these comments, but if your team leader is not, that's a quick way to not have your job. You should always defer what your team does. You can bring up suggestions, don't be afraid to communicate. But it's important to follow what your team does.
Yes, you'll see here I put in a comment that says say hello in big bold letters. And that should be easier to see now. Say hello in big bold letters. Let's make this smaller. And then I reloaded the page, and you'll see that the say hello in big bold letters is not showing up in the document. So that's a brief, very brief introduction to HTML. There are so many tags. There are also attributes. So I can give this an ID, let's say. Let's say this is the hello world ID. And what that'll do later on is we can reference that ID in other pieces of our code. Because there's other pieces to this puzzle, right? Most web pages you go to, they don't look like that. They don't look like Facebook.com doesn't look like Hello World like we just did. So we'll show you some of what you can do there. So that's a very brief overview. Are there any questions from the Slack channel? Were you able to see what I was working on? Have you been able to follow along? Larissa looks like she's... Okay, awesome. Awesome, thank you. Cool, we'll continue on with this slideshow. So again, we're not going to go over every single reference point. We'll just get a brief overview of HTML. So what you just wrote was HTML, right? That's hypertext markup language. It determines the structure of your document, right? Originally, the web was just a way to share nuclear research documents. Now it's used for any number of things. But it's a language to define how a web page should be displayed. Or what kind of web page it is, really. It's implemented as a standard by web browsers. So there's a governing board for HTML so that all browsers kind of follow this standard so that every browser that implements it can be compliant and actually work, right? So you can write code and run it on Chrome, Safari, Firefox, Edge, Internet Explorer, all those different browsers. It's structured like a tree, so I didn't show you the nesting because you can nest other items inside of here. Right, so another tag, the paragraph tag or the P tag, can live inside here. I wish I had Emmet abbreviations. All right, so this is going to change how this looks just a little bit, but it still should roughly be the same. Yeah, so you'll notice it put a line break above it, like it's a new paragraph. So that's a sort of introduction to nesting, and you can nest things inside each other all day long. You can go as far down as you need to. The tree can get as long or as tall as it needs to. And each one of those elements inside of the tree, right, each branch. This is a very helpful website that I accidentally clicked on. It's called MDN. Okay, so that's Hello World. That's a P tag. They can nest indefinitely. They can look, all sorts of ways. And that's sort of how you'll build out the skeleton of your web page. And the demo's over, so we'll move on to CSS. So CSS is another piece of the puzzle. There are 3 pieces to the web development puzzle. It's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Each one of those handles a certain portion of the website. So HTML is the skeleton, it's the backbone. CSS puts meat on those bones, as it were. It shows different colors, it lets you change the font, it lets you show animations, and so on and so forth. So CSS is a essential piece of the web development puzzle. And to start writing CSS, you don't need to create a new file. You can just open a style tag. And then what we're going to do is style some of the elements on this page. And you do that via selector. So what that means is we need to tell CSS which parts of our HTML we want to style. Right? So let me do a quick example and then I'll go over some more things. Let's do P, color red. What this is going to do is make the text in between every P tag on this page red. So if I go back to the page and hit reload, you'll see it's red. But if I add another P tag that says not red, it's going to be red. There it is. So you see, it says not red in English, but the computer still thinks it should be red. So how can we fix that? Because CSS is a cascading style sheet, you can add different selectors that will override the behavior of a higher up selector. So what you can do is type class, not red, and then you'll use a class selector, which is prefixed with a dot. So we want to say, for every not red class, we want the color to be black. But let's say we want to add some flair to it, right? What if we want the background to be green? Bam. It's beautiful. This is a wonderful web page. I hope y'all. So obviously this is still just one piece of the puzzle, right? But we're starting to see how you might. And the other thing about the CSS is you don't just have color names. You have an entire color wheel's worth of color. So you can get gradients. You can get different shades of pastels, and there's lots of different colors available to you. And in fact, if you go into Visual Studio Code, there might be, I think there's a color picker. Yeah. So you can kind of just drag this around. So let's say we want it to be like a soft green. We don't want it to be a super harsh green. And that'll automatically fill in the value necessary. And what this is a function that calculates the color by red, green, blue value. So This is 128 points of red, 202 points of green, 128 points of blue. And that creates the color that we see. Yes?
Is there like a glossary of like, you know, the H1, the style?
Yes.
Or like somewhere to know what all the different
So what Raven is asking is there a reference sheet, a glossary of terms for HTML, CSS, etc.? The answer is yes. Developer.mozilla.org is what I use when I want to know detailed information about things. Some of it might be too detailed, but it is very useful to see all of the HTML elements, like here's a dialogue element. I don't know what that means, but they'll tell you on this particular page, right? They'll give you some examples. They'll give you some accessibility considerations. So one thing about the web is you want to make sure it's accessible to many people. So that's one other element that CSS and HTML can help with.
So Jonathan, if I want to leave a comment in my CSS, how would I use it? Still use the same sentence?
Why don't we try it, Dustin? So let's say I don't want the background color anymore. So before we learned that open parentheses, exclamation point, dash dash, space, go to the end of the line, and then say dash dash, close bracket. So it says expected, or curly bracket was expected. So what's going to happen is this page will probably fail to render if I reload it. I know.
Just trying really hard.
Yeah. So generally speaking, this is not best practice to have the style in HTML. I'm just doing it for illustration purposes. If I were to have this in an actual CSS style sheet, this comment, it would fail to render in the browser. So to comment in CSS, you use the double //. And this is, sorry, not the double //. */ which is a multi-line comment in JavaScript. Okay, are there any questions? Are you still able to answer questions? Or?
Yeah, I can answer them.
Awesome.
That was one of the questions in there, so I figured it'd be nice for you to demonstrate.
Yeah, okay. So there's various ways to comment. Obviously, this looks, Visual Studio Code appreciates this a lot more now. So if I go here, it still should be not red without a green background. Okay. So that's the basics of CSS. You can also go further down the specificity by doing an ID, right? So that's when we put an ID, hello world ID. So we can select that with a hash and say hello world ID. We can say rotate 180. I don't know what this will do. I think it might turn it on its head. Nope. It should work.
It was asked if you could share the link, the Mozilla link.
Yes, I'll do that.
Just whenever you get a second.
Yep. So that paired with free code camp is going to be very powerful for you. You should be able to make a lot of progress if you have the time to dedicate to it. And yeah, so I'm trying to figure out why the blue is not showing up, but I guess I don't need the red. Generally speaking, you won't do element level selectors unless you're building an entire theme for a website, right? So websites usually have themes that in colors that sort of show you what it should look like and things like that. So it'll set up like a style guide almost, so that you have a specified blue and then several different other kinds of blues that you'll use throughout the website. So that's what the whole level style selector will usually be used for. Generally speaking, you'll just use out-of-the-box themes like Bootstrap or a material design system. Or does Apple have one?
No, Google has one.
Yes.
Apple Cupertino.
Right, okay. Yeah, okay. So we'll go ahead and pass on this. Generally speaking, the lowest level specificity goes first, right? So the IDs are going to be styled first. No, sorry, it goes the other way around. Elements will be styled first, classes next, then IDs. So if you want to apply a style, you want to do it based on an ID more than you want to do it based on a class. But classes can help because you can have more than one of a class. You can't have more than one of an ID. So let's say I wanted to add a hello world ID to this p tag. This is invalid HTML now. It doesn't know which hello world ID selector to apply to because there's more than one. So IDs are unique across the entire document. But now it's blue, so.
Yeah, because you gave an ID.
Right. Right.
It just hadn't reloaded. Your browser's messing with you.
Awesome.
Element, style, class, ID.
Element, class, ID, style. So style is another attribute of HTML. You can also style an element with a style attribute. So if I said style equals color blue, now it's blue. It is generally considered bad practice to do it this way because it is not as easily seen or centralized. So if you're working on how the website looks, you're going to be spending a lot of time in the CSS file. And if some of the styles are in the HTML, you're not going to know that necessarily. So you'll be like, why isn't this applying the way I think it will? And then you'll realize, oh, somebody put a style tag on this HTML, and that's no good. Or I put a style attribute on this tag, and that's going to be shown over any other style you want to apply to it. Okay, so again, there are a ton of CSS. There's a ton of things you can do with CSS. It's not just the colors. It's not just the fonts. You can do animations. You can do rounded corners. You can do. There's so many CSS tutorials as well. CSStricks.com. I can post that. Is one that I search up regularly, and it's a blog that'll tricks.com. So you can have you can create spinners with CSS. You can, do all sorts of things with CSS. Let me post this in Slack. And then I think that's a good spot for a break. So we'll be back shortly. Stay tuned.
So you said you were having trouble with your computer. Is there anything I can help you with?
Yeah, yeah.
I see that on my Mac.
Yeah.
I switched the
What,
last name.
what?
I did
Yes.
something wrong, so I now
Yes,
got it.
absolutely. Playing with it is great. Playing with it is great.
Okay, okay.
Dustin, where's the restroom?
It's over in the corner and back there, there's like a little eating area and there's a bathroom.
I'm sorry. Over stuff.
So next week, we take a break.
Yes.
Get some food, please.
I will. It just because I didn't want to eat.
Yes.
And my dog gets in his body.
Yeah, it's not cheap. I already brought one here much, so.
And
Take some home to Isaiah.
I don't know, there's a bunch of those that were
Please. Tell him I got it specifically for him.
so go to
Yeah, there's
internet options. Internet work.
Seventh grade, someone very often.
Wi-Fi is off. Click on Wi-Fi here. Turn Wi-Fi on.
Gluten-free donut holes. Gluten-free, right? And vegan. Oh, and vegan. We're that's just.
Okay, so this, and you use this computer all the time, or?
No.
Okay, so it looks as if someone has removed the Wi-Fi hardware. Which, can you turn it over for a second? Just turn on the map. It's open with undamaged, and then it's not recognizing. I have never seen that. I'm a Mac guy, so this is a very odd
In one sitting.
thing. Let me look it up and see if I can see if there's a. So our Mac, you can also if someone could have done something to trick it.
right. So that's CSS in a nutshell. There's a ton more you can do with it. Most of the really accomplished front-end developers know CSS really well. I'm a back-end developer, so I don't know CSS really well. So I will see if I can find someone who's willing to join as a Slack mentor or something to ask more questions about CSS. But selectors determine what gets styled and when, and the key value pairs determine how. So those key value pairs are the color, colon, green, color, colon, red, etc. So next we'll be looking at the last item we'll be looking at, the last piece of the puzzle. This is where we actually do something that we can export. Well, I say export. This is what code looks like when you're not writing for the browser, even though we're writing for the browser. But there's a lot of C and C++ language constructs and syntax that you'll get to understand and know. So JavaScript is a scripting language so that we can change or do things on an HTML page, whereas right now it's just not interactive, right? We're not clicking on anything. We're not, submitting data anywhere. It's implemented as a standard by web browsers. Again, all of these are standards. The W3C board determines what goes into the standard and how it evolves and changes over time. Because sometimes you get, like video wasn't around in the 1990s. Internet video wasn't around when HTML was invented. So eventually they had to add a video tag. And audio wasn't being distributed on the internet, so they had to add an audio tag. So that's what the W3C board does, is it sort of implements new things over time. There's a general purpose and very powerful server-side JavaScript runtime. This basically lets you write JavaScript and run it on your computer instead of in the browser. And it's called Node.js, so you'll install that at some point down the line. But we'll go ahead and get into a demo now of what JavaScript can do. So to start writing JavaScript, you go to the bottom of your HTML, create a script tag. And this is where you'll write your JavaScript, down here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a button that prompts a user for their name, right? So we're going to click a button and it's going to say, what's your name? Then once they enter their name, it's going to say, hello, person's name. So that's the requirements of the program, right? So we're going to show you how to implement that in HTML. Or not HTML, JavaScript. So I'm going to do a little bit of debugging along the way, so please be patient with me as well as I do that. So we're going to type console.log hello world to start. Okay. And then we're going to open up the developer console by hitting F12. And what the developer console is a interactive input-output menu for JavaScript. So for instance, I can write JavaScript in here. I can write the same thing I wrote in the HTML document. And I can hit enter and it'll print hello world to the console. It'll also print undefined because that's the return value of console.log. We'll talk about return values later on, but it's a very important programming concept. Okay, so what I expect to happen when I hit refresh is I get hello world in the console. Okay, so what I was checking for was to see if my code would be run as soon as I hit the page. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look up the prompt. I think it's still in, yeah, so window.prompt. Window.prompt allows you to open up a window, and that's not what window is for in the window.prompt. But it opens up a modal window that says, you can say like, hey, what's your name? And it'll let you input something. So let's go ahead and demo that real quick. Go over to our developer tools, prompt, hey there, what's your name? Hit enter. Didn't do anything. Okay. Oh, there it is. So we can type in Jonathan. Click OK. And then if we look back in our console window, you'll see that Jonathan was returned from the prompt function. So we need to save this somewhere and then reuse it later on to say, hello world, Jonathan. And how we're going to do that is with an alert. We go over here, there's another method on window called alert. And this is window.alert. It instructs the browser to display a dialog with an optional message and to wait until the user dismisses the dialog. So let's go ahead and try that out as well in our console. Let's do alert. Hello, Jonathan. Welcome to my program. Would you like to play a game? Little War Games reference for those that are old enough. But you'll see I've got an alert in here, and it says, hello, Jonathan. Welcome to my program. Would you like to play a game? So we've basically done the program in the console. So now we need to put it all together so it runs as a program. So what I'm going to do is go back to this console, and I'm going to copy these two lines, and go back in here, and paste them in.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
How do you comment in
//. So, well, okay, there's two ways you can do JavaScript comments. The first way is to comment a single line. You just type // like so. To do more than one line, you do /* and then a */ at the end. Right, yes. So now I can write console.log blah. Right? But I don't actually want these comments, so I'm going to uncomment them. Well, doesn't know how to do it. Okay. So let's save that. So this is, hang on, format documents. Okay, so I just went ahead and did a format document and it formatted my code for me. So now we have a program that will log hello world, prompt, and then say hello Jonathan. It won't say hello name. So that's a problem. We need to fix that. So remember, Jonathan was initially the value from this prompt. So we need to figure out a way to save the value that comes out of that function. Right? So to do that, there's variables in JavaScript. What variables are basically data, right? So when you save a file to your hard drive, it's just data, right? And then you can copy and paste it and move it around. Well, in a computer, we have access to the RAM, which is different from the hard drive, right? So what variables allow you to do is store data in memory. And now memory is only available as long as your program is running, right? So when you close your program, all the data in memory goes away with it. So this is for basically operating on data, and then when you need to save data, you save it to the disk or somewhere else, like a web server or something. That's much further on down the line, but this is basically just data, right? So if I want to save, you know that Jonathan comes out of the prompt function, right? So if I want to save that in a variable, I just say var username, and the var keyword is the basic JavaScript keyword. It's out of fashion. There's a new JavaScript keyword that we can use. So I basically show this to connect it with the variable concept. You shouldn't use var. Instead, we're going to use const, which is short for constant. And the reason why we use that more often than not is because unless we're reassigning a variable, we don't need, when we don't reassign a variable, the interpreter, the JavaScript interpreter, can manage the variables more effectively, right? So if you wanted to change this username at some point, you could use a let keyword instead, right? So this means if we can set it to username equals Jonathan. And it's also good practice to end your lines with a semicolon. It's not necessary per se in JavaScript, but it is recommended. In most languages, it's necessary. It's good practice, for sure. Yes, it is good practice to do it. Right. So let's go ahead and do some debugging, right? Let's see what our program will do. Let me log the username. So this is going to log the value of this variable username. So whatever comes out of prompt will get logged to the console. And then we'll set it to Jonathan. So this should just be Jonathan. So that's what we expect to happen. Let's go ahead and run our program. We'll reload the page. Let's say Alon. How do you spell your name, Alon? A-L-O-N. Hit OK. It'll say hello, Jonathan. But if we pull up our console, you'll see we got the value Alon from the prompt. So now we just need a way to put that into the alert function. So we need to replace this with username. And the way you do that in JavaScript is a little tricky. So let me give a quick example. I'm going to do the string interpolation way. So instead of opening with double quotes, right? That's what we normally do to do a string, is double quotes. And a string is just a string of characters, right? So words and letters, characters strung together. So that's when I say string, that's what I mean. Is anything between the double quotes is a string. So what we're going to do is we want to put username is colon username, and we want to get the value of the username variable. We don't want to say user is username. That's not helpful to anybody.
Try to change username to be something more conventional of a variable. What is that?
Input.
No, I mean not the name of it, the value of it, because you're now printing a prompt.
I'm confused. What are you saying? This is live code review, people.
I was saying that you're having a prompt, hey there, what's your name?
Yeah.
I'm saying for the purpose of this next part, you may want to change it
Like that?
to a more standard.
prompt
Just
output
keep going,
value.
I'll tell you afterwards.
All right, cool. All right, so instead of double quotes, if you start with backticks, you get some pretty cool features. So we're going to say username is colon space, and then we're going to do dollar, open curly bracket, close curly bracket. And inside of that, you can write JavaScript of any kind, and it will interpret it and get the value that it returns from the expression. What that means is we can just put in prompt output value here, and it will print username is whatever we put in that box, right? So if I reload the page, pull up my console, let's say it's Dustin this time. Notice it still says hello Jonathan, but it says username is Dustin. It doesn't say username is prompt output value. It says username is Dustin. So that is what that is called with the backticks and the dollar curly brackets is string interpolation. And what that means is you can input variables that get evaluated once the code is run. So you may not care what the username is, you just want the value of the username. Make sense?
Yes. I was on a question. So like the backticks and dollar sign, curly symbol, like, did you just memorize that?
I did.
Okay, so like, if you're starting off like brand new, is that something that you learned in like some free,
Yes.
free coding?
Again, I'm giving you a broad overview
Yeah.
of the first 3 modules in Free Code Camp, right? So
Okay.
here's the responsive web design certification. That'll get you like CSS and HTML. And then here's JavaScript algorithms and data structures. That'll give you the JavaScript you need. There's a front-end development libraries that I'd like to get to. I don't know if we'll get to it in this course, but stick around and we'll get to it eventually. Front-end.
Finish what you're saying.
This is really what you're looking to get towards. Is this logo is for React. React.js is what folks are looking for on resumes. They're not necessarily looking for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, although I think they should be, because those are essential technologies that build the framework that React builds. So again, Free Code Camp is all self-paced, so I don't expect everybody to go at the same rate. Whatever time you have to devote to it, and you'll get out of it what you put into it. So yeah, and we're available to answer questions nights and weekends, given our the time we have, and I'll try and get some more people in, so it's not just us. I think I have one other. I think I have Zach. It's the only other person there, but. So yeah, that's why it's. I know it's kind of like throwing you in the deep end, but that's kind of what I was hoping to do with this lecture a little bit.
I get it. I just meant like, I don't know, I guess the more you work with like the backticks and the.
Yeah.
things
It's
like
one of the hardest things to overcome is fear of new syntax, because I remember when I learned lambda functions in C#, and that really scared me for a second.
They're great.
We'll show you what the syntax kind of looks like here a little bit too, because
So another thing that's important to remember, we call this a language, but it's not like English. English has an infinite, like, its syntax is way harder than what you will eventually learn. Like, there's a finite amount of syntax here, and then just things that you're defining.
Yep.
So it seems like a lot, but eventually the syntax you'll probably have memorized. It won't be a whole lot of rules. It'll just be there's a lot of things here that other people have made up that aren't necessarily syntax, they're just like new words that you're learning. But the syntax itself will eventually, you will probably have that memorized. It won't be the thing that you'll constantly have to look up. And it probably won't even take that long.
Is curly bracket a technical term?
I
Yes.
use curly bracket.
Is there like a real?
I've never heard anyone else say anything other than curly bracket. I've heard mustache bracket before.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a little like a mustache. There's actually a JavaScript library called Mustache. Yeah. Well, actually, it's a more than just JavaScript, but it's called Mustache, and it's called Mustache because it uses the two curly brackets, and you can really see that it looks like a mustache with that. So, I'll pull it up. Why not?
There are, curly brackets, angle bracket, curly bracket. Brace. I think brace is actually technical.
Oh, that's actually what my professor called it.
It is a brace. Brace bracket.
Mustache template system, but it is available in JavaScript. Anyway, I digress. We're still not at the point where we can prompt and get somebody's name and put it back out. So what that means is we can change out the quotes in the alert for backticks, right? And we can change out this Jonathan for $ open braces prompt output value. Username is no longer a variable in that scope. Okay, so now what we expect to happen is we get the value and it'll say, hello, blah, welcome to my program. So whoever we type in, we should get their name back. So let's refresh. Hey there, what's your name? So whose name's next? Tara? Sure, okay. Tara. Hello, Tara. Welcome to my program. Would you like to play a game? So yeah, that's a first stab at that. Now, I'm the architect of this program. So what if I want a special message just for me? How would I go about implementing that? I'm teaching a class. I should just go ahead and I shouldn't wait for a so what we're going to do is we're going to introduce an if statement.
What is an if statement?
An if statement allows some code to execute and others to not. So I'm about to show you. So you'll see these braces, right? So see how they're highlighted? We can put code between those braces, like console.log, stuff is true. Stuff is false. Basically, if true, if true still means true, we're going to go ahead and log stuff is true to the console. Otherwise, we're going to say stuff is false. So unless the laws of the universe...
Normally, you're not going to write the word true
Right.
in there. You're going to write some sort of conditional expression like, is 3 greater than 1? And you won't necessarily know. It'll be some variable that's holding something that you don't necessarily know what it's going to be, and you're going to check, hey, is it greater than 1?
Right.
And if it is, it will return true, and then it will execute the code in the first bracket. Otherwise, it'll execute everything in the else.
Right. So in this case, we want to see if the prompt output value equals my name. So in JavaScript, it's triple equals sign. You can use double equals, but it's dangerous, and you shouldn't do it.
Because it doesn't always work.
So now we're getting into types, right? So the computer doesn't differentiate between these two variables. Or does differentiate between these two variables, right? Technically, they have the same value, right? The character 1. But because 1 is wrapped with quotes, the JavaScript interpreter sees that as a string of characters, only one character, but a string of characters, but the number as a number. And the number has different properties because we taught rocks how to think, right? That's what computers are. And they can do math. So they know numbers really well. They don't know strings very well. So this number, if you did 1 plus 32, let's do this in a separate line. I want to format this. Okay, so format document. So down here, what we can do is we can log out the result of number plus 1, right? And then string plus 1. What do you think is going to happen when we run this code? Right? We should just see 2 for both of them, right? No? Oh, I gotta get past this.
So before he shows us, what do you think is going to print for the first one? The one with just.
I know it's just gonna print an error, but I don't think the second one, the string is gonna come too.
So this is sort of like a child's way of addition, right? So someone who doesn't understand addition, when you put 1 and 1 together, you get 11, right? That's why numbers versus strings are important. If you add 2 strings together, it just bumps it up onto the end of the string and just adds another character to the string of characters. Whereas if you do a number, if you did number plus 1, you get 2, which is the correct answer. But with the double equals, what will try and happen is if you have a string of 2, it's going to try and see what's on the left-hand side and what's on the right-hand side and try and kind of coerce the string to a number before it compares it. And the problem with that is you can run into a coercion that means it's false when it really should be true, or true when it really should be false. But the triple equals does a strict comparison between types. So if it's not the same type, left and right-hand side, it will go ahead and say false. Does that make sense? So if I type in 45 to what's your name, and it somehow gets transformed into a number, it'll still be a string, but let's say I transform it to a number, and I try and compare them, it's going to say, your name's not Jonathan, run the regular program. Anyway, that's a digression about conditional expressions, but those are super important. Practically all software will use conditional expressions like that. It is the backbone of AI. It's the backbone of any software you run anywhere, right? Because you want your computer to know things and do certain things based on that knowledge. Okay. So now that digression's out of the way, so now we have stuff is true, stuff is false, but we want to replace that with a different message. So if I say, let me go ahead and copy and paste that, because this is just the default, right? We want to just say, hello, welcome to my program, would you like to play a game? And in keeping with the War Games theme, we'll create a similar message that's silly. So we'll say, we'll still keep the string interpolation because we may want to change. The other thing that's cool about programming is you can change out variables dynamically. So you don't have to keep hard coding these. You can save this to a file, right? This name Jonathan, and then read in that file and then compare whatever's in the file against that if statement. So hello prompt output value. I've concluded the only winning move is not to play. All right. And technically the architect in War Games' name was David, so We'll go with accuracy. So this says, hey there, what's your name? If I type in Jonathan, it'll say, hello Jonathan, welcome to my program. Would you like to play a game? I reload it again and I say David. It'll say, hello David, I've concluded the only winning move is not to play. So that's how you build out a program, is through if statements and everything like that. Now, before we close, I think I'll go over a little bit about functions. Do you think that would be helpful, Dustin?
It's absolutely helpful. I'm not sure if we have questions. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I think we should probably stop for Q&A because we only got about 20 minutes left.
And then, if there are any questions, we can help people get set up on Slack, free code,
Right, yep.
Studio, all
Yeah,
of those.
it might be wise if there's not a lot of questions to have start free code camp, and we can ask questions while we're here.
Yep.
Just to make sure everybody has a good idea of what's going on.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a break for questions. So if anyone on Slack has any questions or hasn't been set up on Free Code Camp or Visual Studio yet, chime in the Slack channel and we'll see if we can help you out. I'm gonna get a bagel.
There is.
I understand there is a way. I guess I was just asking. It was simple enough that you would like to have it down. It doesn't work very well.
Okay, I was like, why can't I click it? How do you?
Okay. Yep, and we'll be available this week to, yep. No problem. Thank you for coming along.
What concerning why I can't work on this problem? Yes, I have a set of twins that
Oh, you do?
are 9.
Oh, wow.
There's no telling.
Yeah, my boys are 8 months old, so
It gets easier.
I hear that. What's your bid? We're taking bids on what age it's easier.
How old are they?
They're 8 months.
8 months. 2. Even though it's like they say terrible twos, but they start to
Like look at each
look
other.
at each other and like spend time and like recognize, oh, this is my best friend, and then you get like 30 minutes of like them playing
Yeah.
and not entertaining them.
That's nice. You
Yeah,
get a little bit of a break.
you get a little bit of break.
Yeah, they're starting to do a little bit of that, but they're nowhere near attention span of 30 minutes. It's like they'll do it for 2 minutes.
They're the
Okay.
best friends.
Yeah, I'm hoping that they'll get there. Sharika, we will be around, so just send us a message on Slack and we'll see if we can help you out. There's a couple other people in the Slack channel that'll be able to help you out. Zach Alexander's one of them. He's actually my boss. And then I'll see if I can get some other people in.
I don't do JavaScript.
Zach Alexander?
Is your boss?
Mm-hmm.
You have your boss helping?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then Dustin and Gregory are the other two. And I'll keep people updated as we add more people.
John, what is the vanilla syntax for putting our variables in the
Do you use
HTML?
like flashcards to learn syntax? Or you just?
No, repetition. Type out, make things.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I would recommend do not use flashcards. That is a bad way. It's not necessarily a bad way, but the thing that you'll be doing at a job is typing these things out over and over again. So just, I would skip that part and just find a little thing you want to make and try to make it. And just write you through that brute force of doing it, you'll learn the few syntax things you need to use over and over.
Unfortunately, the best way to learn is like failing a bunch of times.
Yes.
I think that's why I hated it in college.
Failure is super important.
It really is, unless you're in like a college where failure means you don't get a degree. So like, this is a good way to learn.
But in the workplace, I found that as long as you're upfront about something, especially if you're a junior developer, which you will be, they're perfectly okay with failure.
Absolutely. Much
They,
more.
they would like you to, rather than being crazy.
What types of what are y'all coding and programming for? Like specifically, is it like, a dishwasher, or like a video game, or?
I work at Hotel Effectiveness. It is a hotel software as a service. So we market to hotel managers to help them meet their profit goals. So it's mostly a financial and accounting kind of piece of software. And I write reports. That's basically what I do. I write integrations, which is extracting data from one source, transforming it, and then loading it somewhere else. And that's a lot of what business programming is. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. If you can work with tabular data, you can work in enterprise development.
What is type of data?
Excel, CSV, JSON.
And those are data like files?
Yeah, rows and columns. It's in a table. So what I work with every day is a database called MySQL. And that database it runs so much of the internet. But if you can learn that database and administrate it well and write reports for it or to get data out of it, you'll be secure in a job for years and years to come. Just because most internet companies depend on databases like MySQL to store their data. And data is the thing that keeps companies going, or nowadays anyway. So, Dustin?
I write, have you ever been to Home Depot and asked someone, hey, where is something? The app that they pull up on their phone? I write that app for the store that supplies Home Depot. So like Home Depot's Home Depot. I write that same app. For them. Yeah. And mostly, I think now Home Depot is trying to be the competitor, so they've moved away from that, and so they are doing it out on their own without Home Depot or Lowe's to buy from them. Now they're going directly to clients. So this office park here is probably all of it. The trees and greenery, even bricks, maybe even like the construction supplies were supplied by my company, SiteOne. So I write an Android app. I use none of this. So as Jonathan's going through, I'm refreshing my memory on the syntax of JavaScript that I do not see every day. So I pretty much my entire career just write iOS and Android applications, which is what I enjoy doing. You will learn enough here if you follow through the courses that if you say, hey, I don't want to make web applications because I went to boot camp just like this, where I don't have a degree in anything. I have a degree in film production. That has nothing to do with programming, no one cares. I will say that some places care that you have a degree, but some of them don't.
I feel like more and more these days don't care.
Yeah, they care that you know that you can come into an interview and you can show them that you know how to code.
Yeah, they do. These kind of jobs have more technical interviews than other jobs. It's more, from my experience at least, there's a lot more like technical interviews where you like come in and you write code for them.
Yes. And the weird thing is, a lot of places you're going to learn how to write code on a computer, and then you're going to come somewhere and they're going to give you a whiteboard. They're going to say write code on this whiteboard, which is going to feel really weird. A lot of them are moving away from for my latest job where I work now, for my interview, they said, hey, set up these types of pages on a phone, make it work this way, and here's an example that we've already written for you. And I said, what is your policy on copying and pasting? And they said, well, that's what we do at work sometimes. And I was like, okay, well, you've already written it, so I'm just going to copy and paste and change the names. And they were like, excellent, you're hired. Like, because that's what we would do. Like, we wouldn't sit here and try to write all this out. Now, not everyone's going to have that opinion, so you have to feel it out. But there are a lot of people who do because that's what
It's always a good question to ask and they love it when you ask questions in interviews.
Yes.
Some of them don't. You don't want to work for those people.
Yeah. If you start doing this, it's a different. At least for me, I came from somewhere where no one wanted to give me a job to a place where people were begging to give me a job, like fighting to give me a job. And so that's a different mindset. You don't have to go with the first person just because,
And getting to that level may take years.
Yes.
But with the right marketing, it may take a year.
Yeah.
So LinkedIn, I have a guy on here named Josh Tatum who has a good way with social media. I'll see if I can get him to lead a workshop on LinkedIn profile development so that you can maximize your reach to people on LinkedIn. Because that's where I get hit up all the time to go work places that I don't want to work.
The thing that I did was
Mostly 'cause I love my
made sure I
job.
had a really good LinkedIn profile, put links to code and things that I've written, and then as soon as I had everything the way I wanted, I did a global search in LinkedIn for everyone in Atlanta with technical recruiter as their job title, and sent a friend request to all of them. And then I didn't do anything else. And then they called me. Usually I found that if I apply directly for a coding job, no one cares and they won't look at it. But if you reach out to a recruiter, you'll unfortunately get spammed with hundreds of calls that some of them aren't going to be legitimate, but many of them will be.
And this is a conversation for you.
Yes.
Yes, once you have a couple of the certifications under your belt. So,
Don't let this freak you out.
Michelle brought up a good question. So let me go over what we sort of would like to see you do between now and next week. Alon, have a good one. Oh, are you heading out?
Yes, to go get my computer checked out.
Awesome. Have a good one. Thank you. So I think if you... Yes. So the first 3 lessons: learn HTML by building a cat photo app, and don't be intimidated by these huge amounts of things. Each of these takes about 40 seconds to do. And then you'll learn CSS by building a cafe menu, and then learn CSS colors by building a set of colored markers. So if you can get those done by the end of next week, we will be tickled pink with your progress. I don't know. So yeah, all you got to do is follow the steps, right? So they'll tell you the P element is used to create a paragraph of text on a website. Create a P element below your H2 element and give it the following text. And it'll go through at the very beginning. I skipped to the 3rd one. Right? So here's a preview of what you will build. You hit start coding, yes. HTML elements have opening tags like H1 and closing tags like that. Find H1 element and change the text between its opening and closing tags to say cat photo app. So it'll tell you what you need to do, and then you just do exactly what it says. Then you hit check your code. It gives you a thumbs up. And you hit submit and go to the next challenge. Add an H2 element below the H1 element that says cat photos. H2 cat photos. I check my code. It says, oh no, it doesn't pass because it is not exactly the way it says. And so on and so forth. So it's pretty easy to do, and it's a good first project, the cat building or the cat photo application. they'll give you the photos. You don't need your own cat photos. But yeah, if those 3 could be done, you would be making great progress towards your first certification. Any final questions? I think Michelle Littles is typing. I think we're going to wrap up in the next 5 minutes and give you all the rest of your Saturday back.
I have just one thing, I find an error and I cannot figure out what is wrong with it. It's the part here with Alice, it shows up.
So, with if statements, you do not need semicolon. That semicolon right there is what's causing the issue. You see between the.
Okay, I have one question. At what point in your journey are you like, all right, I know not to apply for a job?
I'll tell you when I get there.
Oh, okay.
What I'm trying to say is, at least for me and most people that I know,
Is that a single quote or?
that unless they're overconfident, they always have a tinge of, like, when you finish this, if you finish this whole course and this certification, you will know enough to get a job.
And then should be back.
But I can almost guarantee you won't feel like it. You will feel like, I really don't think I know enough to do, because I went through a much more intensive 16 days.
So there's some issues here.
A day, 3-month-long course, 7 days or 6 days a week. And when I was done with that, I still was like, I don't think I can get a job. But with much less than I learned there, I was able to get a job.
Well,
So
it should be. That's the thing.
it's just be confident that you can, and that you really do need the skills that you'd be able to offer, but also be humble and know that most people don't have a problem with that when it comes to programming, especially when they're first starting out, but be humble and know that there's always more to learn. You're never going to know all of it. In fact, I don't do JavaScript. I learned a language called C# from Microsoft. But my first job was like they said, oh yeah, we want you to do a C#. We got in there, and then it was just JavaScript.
Okay.
And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's fine, you'll figure it out. And I did for a little while. I didn't like the job.
In most
So I
cases,
moved over, I could do the thing that I learned.
So you'll see.
I had a lot of other problems, not just
You'll
that.
see that.
But yeah, what I was trying to say earlier, I think
See how
I
this has like.
got sidetracked before I finished my thought, was when you're done with this, you'll know the concepts to move to different languages. Like, you're like, hey, you know what?
So
I wanna be
the
an
problem
engineer.
was here.
And I got a Mac, so I can do that, and I want to learn Swift. You'll know enough concepts to be able to do that. Swift
The other
is a
thing I
little
want to
different.
say is,
It's not as flexible as JavaScript.
this is.
No language is as flexible as JavaScript.
Well, let's go.
JavaScript will let you get away with a lot of things. Most languages will. I prefer not to get away with those things because it teaches me to have better practices. Whereas JavaScript, you can make a lot of mistakes.
Gotcha.
The other thing to be able to do, and I know
That's
it's
fine.
how you.
I'll do that anyway.
Okay.
But yeah, anyway, I think there were always, I went to boot camp, I also taught a camp at Georgia Tech. It's been my experience that everyone always has more than a tinge of, I don't think I'm gonna make it, but they're doing perfectly fine. You're right at the beginning. So I would say just focus on learning the material, getting through as much of it as possible, coming here asking questions, participating, and then not only just doing the content. I would say that you need to have the want to go outside and do something else. Like when if you really want to go above and beyond when you're done with the cat thing, try to recreate that in the Visual Studio Code
If it's not.
outside of the normal environment. You may fail, that's okay,
Okay.
but you also maybe have the drive to look it up and figure it all out, and then you'll be there.
Thank you.
Well, I was gonna say.
There's also nothing more rewarding
The reason why that
than
is.
working on something for a really long time and it not working over and over and over again, and then you finally get that breakthrough. Oh my gosh, it's addicting.
Yeah, it
That's
is
the
pretty
only
great.
way to
So
have
that's
some
my computer.
I would be, next week, because I'll be out of town,
So
but
I would
I'll plan
use
on
backticks.
watching YouTube
So like when you're writing,
And that's the other part, like, unlike learning another language, like a spoken language, when you finish learning JavaScript, you will pretty much 100% know another language. With just very minor
The
differences.
first one is the hardest one. After that, it's pretty, I wouldn't say easy, but it is much easier to pick up other ones because there's a lot of similarities between them.
if you had
And the logic is typically the same, it's the syntax that's usually the hardest.
JavaScript.
So,
All the concepts will be there, you'll just have to learn how they write.
yeah.
So
Some
I
are,
did
some are easier to
double
like
here
read
and
than
double
others
here.
too, like just Java, not
Java?
JavaScript, but Java, to me,
Yeah, something
That was the
instead
language I
of
learned.
using one and I used two, and then
I loved it.
two
It was
again
like
in the middle.
very
Yeah, so you
for
can,
That's-
humans
that's
to
not-
read,
yeah, so
which made it
copy
easier
this.
for me to understand. Like there was a lot of
Do it in single
words
quotes.
in it that made it, like the if statements.
Yeah.
If this, then this, else this, like it just kind of made sense to me. Like if this is true, do this.
Confused.
Otherwise, do this.
Oh, the string.
Then do this.
Now there's
Like it just
some
seems
some
very
class
applied.
I have.
And depending on the language that you choose, you get a lot of like help
So,
as well. For instance, you're using Visual Studio Code. I work in Microsoft Technologies. I use Visual Studio. It's a much larger application.
All right, thank you all. I'm gonna end the live stream now.
I just will start typing, and there's an AI that will intuit what I want.
See y'all next week.